Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're zeroing in, really focusing hard on the three core political institutions of the European Union. If you've got an oral exam coming up on the European Council, the Council of the EU, and the European Parliament, well, this is basically your roadmap. We're getting straight into their composition, their powers, and, crucially, how they actually make decisions. Everything you need to nail it.
Yeah, and our guide here is the treaties themselves. I mean, the whole setup, the institutional framework. It's laid out in Article 13 of the Treaty on European Union, the TEU. But hold on, before we dive into what each institution does, we really need to understand what keeps them in check, what limits them. There are three fundamental principles you absolutely have to know for your exam prep.
Okay, fundamentals first. That makes sense. So what are these constraints on EU action?
Well, first up is the principle of conferral. You'll find it in Articles 4 and 5 of the TEU. Put simply, the EU isn't, a state like France or Germany. It only have the powers, the competences that the member states specifically gave it in the treaties. If a power hasn't been handed over, the EU just can't act. Simple as that.
Right. So the member states ultimately decide what the EU gets involved in. They hold the keys, basically.
Precisely. Then number two is institutional balance. This is all about making sure no single institution gets, too powerful or steps outside its defined job description. They're meant to balance each other out. And finally, there's the principle of loyal cooperation. That's Article 4.3 TEU. It just means that all the institutions and the member states, too, have to work together honestly, in good faith, to achieve the EU's goals. They can't deliberately block each other.
Okay, I get it. They all have to play nicely in the sandbox defined by the law. Right, let's start at the very top then. The institution setting the big picture strategy, the European Council.
Okay, first job here is getting the name straight. This is super important. You must know the difference.
Okay.
We are talking about the European Council, often called the EC. This is the one with the national leaders. It is not the Council of the European Union, which we'll get to next. That's the ministers. And it's definitely not the Council of Europe. So it's a totally separate thing. Deals with human rights, based in Strasbourg, 47 members, nothing to do with the EU structure.
Right, clear distinction needed there. And it's funny, isn't it? The European Council has the top leaders, the most powerful people, but it's actually the newest formal EU institution. Only got official status with the Treaty of Lisbon back in 2009. Before that, it was just informal summits for decades, right? Started back in Paris, 71 or something.
Exactly. And that history really shapes what it is today. It tells you about its composition and its job. The EC is the prime example of intergovernmental cooperation in the EU. It's made up of the heads of state or government from the member states.
Yeah.
So, the prime ministers or presidents, depending on the country. They're the ones with the votes.
Okay, so they're the main players in the room. But they're not totally alone, are they? Who else sits in on these big meetings?
Good question. There are two key people there who don't vote. First, the president of the European Council. They're appointed by the European Council itself using qualified majority voting for a 2.5-year term, which can be renewed once. Their job is to chair the meetings and report back to the parliament. And the second non-voter is the president of the commission. The High Representative for Foreign Policy can also join in, which makes sense given the strategic talks.
Okay. So if the other council, the Council of the EU, is the one actually making the laws, what does the European Council do? Why is it so important? What's its main power?
Its core task, the really big one, is to give the Union the necessary political impetus for its development. That's the official jargon. Basically, they define the general political directions and priorities. They're like the ship's captain, setting the overall course. Think major policy shifts on climate change, or how to handle a big economic crisis, or relations with China. That's their level.
And this is the crucial bit for notes, right? They set the direction, but they can't actually make it happen legally themselves.
That's absolutely spot on. The European Council shall not exercise legislative functions. That's a direct quote you should remember. If they decide, say, we need a new law on AI, they basically tell the Commission or the other institutions, okay, go draft something and get it passed. They're strategic, not legislative.
And the way they make decisions kind of reflects that history as a summit of leaders, doesn't it? How do they usually decide things?
Yeah, the primary method is consensus, which means essentially a decision is made without anyone needing to formally vote yes or no, as long as no leader explicitly objects. Using consensus helps make sure every country feels involved and buys into the direction. It maintains political unity. But keep in mind, they do sometimes use qualified majority voting QMV for certain internal things, like picking their own president or nominating the commission president candidate.
Excellent. Okay, so 3 key takeaways on the European Council for your exam prep. 1, It's the heads of state showing intergovernmentalism, and its main job is setting political direction. 2, its power is strategic only. It's non-legislative. Big point. 3, decisions are usually by consensus to keep everyone on board. Okay, so the European Council sets the big picture. But when we need actual laws written, decisions made concrete, we shift to the second institution, the Council of the European Union. People often just call it the Council, right? This is where the national governments get down to the business of legislating.
That's it. And the really interesting thing here is its variable composition. Unlike the ET, where it's always the top leaders, the Council is technically one institution, but the people in it change depending on the subject. It's always one representative per member state, but at the ministerial level. So it has to be someone who can actually commit their government legally.
So if they're talking about fish quotas, it's the fisheries ministers. If it's about the Eurozone, it's the finance ministers in the EcoFin configuration.
It's exactly right. Your notes mention 10 specialized configurations covering different policy fields, although the treaties themselves only directly name the General Affairs Council and the Foreign Affairs Council. And administratively, there's the presidency. It rotates between the member states. Usually 3 countries team up for 18 months, and each one takes the lead for 6 months.
Right. So if the European Council provides the impetus, the Council provides the actual legislative engine, yeah. What are its main jobs?
Well, its most vital role is the legislative function. It used to be the main decision maker, but today it shares that power equally with the European Parliament. It's a co-legislator. They also approve the EU budget together with the Parliament. That's the shared budgetary function.
And they sort of act like policy coordinators too, don't they? Trying to align national approaches.
Absolutely. A really important coordination function, especially for economic policies, through things like EcoFin, making sure national budgets and strategies line up, more or less. Plus, the Council is the key player when it comes to the Common Foreign and Security Policy, the CFSP. It adopts decisions to start negotiations on international agreements, too.
Okay, now for the really technical bit, but super important for exams, qualified majority voting, or QMV. This replaced that old, complicated weighted vote system.
Yes, QMV is now the default way decisions are made in the Council. Since 2014, it works using the double threshold system. You need to memorize these 2 parts. First, an act needs support from at least 55% of the member states. So right now, that's 15 out of the 27 countries. Second, those countries supporting the act must represent at least 65% of the total EU population, so it considers the citizens living in those states too.
Okay, 55% of countries and 65% of the population. That double lock seems designed to make sure decisions have broad support, both from governments and the people they represent. But what if countries are against something? How can they stop it?
That's where the concept of a blocking minority comes in. It's designed to stop, say, a few big countries dominating or lots of small countries ganging up. To actually block a proposal under QMV, the opposition needs to include at least 4 member states. If fewer than 4 countries vote against, the act passes anyway, even if the 65% population threshold isn't quite met by the yes votes.
Wow, okay. That's a really interesting political detail. So just 4 countries, regardless of their size, can put the brakes on. Doesn't that sometimes lead to gridlock?
Well, that's the eternal balancing act in the EU, isn't it? Efficiency versus making sure everyone feels heard and national interests are protected. It's definitely a powerful lever designed precisely so minority views aren't just ignored. But yes, the trade-off can sometimes be slower decision-making. We should also quickly add that unanimity where every single country has to agree is still needed for a few really sensitive areas. Mostly things like taxation and foreign policy, CFSP stuff.
Got it. Okay, quick recap on the Council of the EU. 3 takeaways. 1, composed of national ministers, and its membership varies by topic. 2, core job is co-legislation with Parliament, plus coordinating national policies. 3, decisions mostly use QMV with that double threshold. 55% of states, A and D, 65% of population.
Okay, moving on to our third institution. This one embodies the democratic side of the Union, the European Parliament, or EP. While the Council speaks for the member states, the Parliament represents the citizens of the European Union.
And the history is really important here, isn't it? It didn't start out this powerful. It was just an assembly with limited advisory powers under the Treaty of Rome. The huge change was in 1979 when MEPs started being elected by direct universal suffrage, citizens actually voting for their representatives directly.
That direct election is absolutely fundamental to its legitimacy, yes. The MEPs serve a 5-year term. Right now, for the 2024-2029 session, there are 720 members of the European Parliament, MEPs.
And how are those 720 seats divided up between the 27 countries? It's not strictly based on population, is it?
No, it's not. They use a system called Degressive Proportionality. It's a bit of a mouthful, but what it means is, yes, larger countries get more MEPs, Germany has the most, capped at 96, but smaller countries get more seats than their population size alone would warrant. There's a minimum floor of 6 MEPs per country, even for the smallest ones like Malta or Luxembourg.
Why do they do it like that? Why not just make it perfectly proportional to population?
Well, it's really a political compromise. It ensures that citizens in smaller member states still feel they have a meaningful voice and aren't completely overshadowed. If it was purely proportional, the biggest 4 or 5 countries would totally dominate the parliament. Degressive proportionality tries to balance representing population size with ensuring representation for all states, reinforcing that idea of unity and diversity.
Okay, makes sense. And once they're elected, MEPs don't sit in national blocks, do they? How do they organize themselves inside the parliament?
That's right. They organize based on political affiliation, not nationality. They form political groups like the center-right European People's Party or the center-left Socialists and Democrats, the Greens, and so on. To be recognized as an official group, you need at least 23 MEPs, and they have to come from at least 1/4 of the member states, so from at least 7 countries currently. This encourages cross-national alliances.
Right, let's talk powers. Because since the Maastricht Treaty, the parliament's role has really grown.
Hugely. Its main function now is legislative power. The game changer was the introduction of what used to be called the co-decision procedure. Now it's known as the Ordinary Legislative Procedure, OLP. And under the OLP, the Parliament is on an equal footing with the Council. For most EU laws, both the Parliament and the Council have to agree for it to pass. The Parliament can even formally ask the Commission to propose new laws.
And what about money? The budget?
They hold the purse strings jointly with the Council. Article 314 of the TFU, that's the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, lays it out. The Parliament has equal say with the Council on the annual EU budget. So, shared budgetary power.
Okay, and finally the big one. Democratic oversight. Keeping the executive, the commission, in check. The parliament has to approve the whole team of commissioners before they can take office. This creates what the notes call a relation of confidence.
Exactly. And that confidence isn't just given at the start, it can be withdrawn. This is where the parliament's ultimate weapon comes in. The motion to censure against the commission. It's in Article 234 TFEU.
That sounds serious, like a political nuclear option. What does it actually take to use that?
It takes a huge majority. You need 2/3 of the votes cast in the parliament, and that 2/3 must also represent an absolute majority of all MEPs, so half the total number plus 1. If a motion of censure passes, the entire commission has to resign as a block. Not just one problematic commissioner, the whole team goes. That's because of the principle of collegiality.
Wait, hang on that phrase. Principle of collegiality. Just for a quick exam definition, what does that mean for the commission?
Collegiality means the commission is treated as a single unified body. Decisions are taken collectively. So if one member messes up badly enough to face censure, the whole body takes responsibility. They speak with one voice, they act as one, and so they fall as one. It's a massive political statement. Although, it's worth noting it's such a high bar that a motion of censure has actually never succeeded.
Interesting. Okay, and we should quickly mention a couple of ways citizens can interact directly with the parliament, too.
Yes, definitely. Any EU citizen has the right to submit a petition to the parliament about anything that falls within the EU's areas of activity.
Yeah.
And the parliament appoints the European Ombudsman. This role was introduced by Maastricht. The Ombudsman is independent and investigates complaints about maladministration, basically,
Yep.
bad management or procedure by EU institutions.
Perfect. Okay, 3 essential takeaways on the European Parliament. 1, represents citizens directly elected using digressive proportionality. 2, it's an equal co-legislator with the Council under the OLP and shares budgetary power. 3, exercises key political control over the Commission, especially with the powerful motion of censure. #outro.
So there we have it. We've broken down the core jobs of these 3 key political players. To sum it up simply, the European Council sets the overall strategy, the big political push. Then the Council, representing the states, and the Parliament, representing the citizens, work together through the ordinary legislative procedure to actually adopt the specific laws. Understanding that interplay is really the heart of how EU lawmaking works.
And here's a final thought to take away, something to mull over as you study. We talked about how the Parliament's power has grown massively, creating this deep relation of confidence with the Commission. The Parliament gives the Commission its legitimacy at the start and holds the power to take it away with that motion of censure.
Right. But given how incredibly difficult it is to actually pass a censure motion needing that massive two-thirds majority and the fact it's never happened, what does that really mean? Does the high threshold just prevent knee-jerk reactions? Or does the sheer difficulty maybe mean the political groups in Parliament are actually a bit too reluctant to use their strongest democratic check? Is the nuclear option almost too big to use? Something to think about definitely as you consider the shifting power dynamics within the EU.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully that deep dive helps clarify things. Good luck with the exam preparation. You've got this.